go together, but good morning and happy Monday, definitely not. But we're very glad to have everybody with us this morning. I hope you had a great weekend and a happy Easter. And we're going to get started here in just a second. Just a few housekeeping. You know, by the end of this, you will have all had the housekeeping. You'll be able to just tell them yourself, and we can just say that thing we do every morning and every afternoon. If you have questions, please chat them in to the chat box, and we will read those out. If you're watching on YouTube live and you comment, we will be able to capture those while we're live and ask those as well. And if it's after the fact and you want to ask questions, please go to auxiliary.uga.edu and click on the Auxiliary Connections tab, and then to the survey and feedback. That's anonymous, or you can identify yourself. It's completely up to you. You can ask your questions. You can leave feedback, tell us what we're doing good, what we're doing that is good, what we could improve on, and then any questions that you may have as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kris Ingmundson for our morning session. Good morning, Kris.
Good morning, Catherine. How are you today?
I am good. I will be better once my coffee is all the way ingested.
I hear ya. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Let me share my screen here. I hope everyone slept well through the weather last night. I'm glad that we didn't get what they said we could have. But anyway, I'm here to talk to us this morning, kick your Monday off with talking about some, diarrhea. Don't waste your TP on a stomach bug. While we're all stuck at home cooking, we want to make sure that we're staying as healthy as possible in all ways. And one thing people don't know quite as much about as they could tends to be basic food safety. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Like Catherine said, my name is Kris Ingmundson. I'm the Food Safety Coordinator for UGA Dining, and a little about my auxiliary story, since we've been telling those in the past week. I actually first started working for dining in 1994 as a student, and I worked at O House my entire undergraduate career here at UGA. And after I graduated, I left, and then I came back in 2003 as an assistant manager at Snelling. I started teaching food safety to our staff at dining in 2005. And I would say I actually started understanding it a couple of years later. And since then, it's become kind of the thing I'm most interested in. I am a certified professional in food safety from the National Environmental Health Association. And I am currently using the TAP program to get my Master's of Public Health and Environmental Health Science. I am almost done, y'all. So that's a little bit about me. I want to start with a quick disclaimer, especially for our dining folks who have tuned in. This presentation focuses on consumer food safety recommendations. In the US, there are different standards for consumer food safety guidelines for what people should do at home, and food service food safety guidelines, which food service operations have to use in their kitchens. So they don't always match, which is a weird story for another time. But what we're talking about today is keeping food safe at home. So dining people, please don't use this presentation to dictate how you do your job when we get back to our kitchens. And feel free to continue what you've learned at work at home, because that is also fine. All in all, I'll try not to confuse you too badly. All right, we're going to start with some super basic microbiology. Pathogens are microorganisms that cause illness. They're usually bacteria or viruses. Can't see, taste, or smell them. They come from the soil, water, animals that we use for food, the human intestinal tract. But many foods that we eat provide the perfect environment for pathogens to grow. So when we talk about pathogen growth, we're not talking about a pathogen getting super big. We're talking about population growth. Their physical size isn't getting any bigger. Instead, they're replicating and producing more copies of themselves. This is important because each foodborne disease has what's known as an infectious dose. That's how many viable pathogens have to be present in order to cause illness. So if there aren't enough of the microorganism present, the person who's ingesting it, especially if they're healthy to begin with, may not experience any illness at all. So it's important to handle food and clean dishes carefully in order to keep our food from becoming contaminated. The CDC estimates that there's about 48 million cases of foodborne illness in the US each year. 138 of those are hospitalized and 3,000 people die in the US every year of foodborne illness. People tend to always attribute foodborne illness to eating at restaurants, and that is a problem. But in this time of quarantine cooking, I don't know if y'all have been watching any of the videos people are posting of themselves cooking in their homes. Have problems at home too, based on my assessment of that particular situation. So anybody can get foodborne illness if they don't handle food correctly. So we're going to start with the basicest of all basics. Wash your hands. The best way to protect ourselves from illness of any type is to keep our hands clean. Pathogens enter our body through our holes, right? Especially our face holes, and our hands are one of the ways they get there. So I think in the past 2 months, we've all learned exactly how much we like to touch our faces. No, I have. It's apparently one of my favorite things to do, and I had no idea. While hand washing seems basic, we're going to talk about how to do it properly. And I'm going to start with a video that shows, this is like perfect healthcare technique on hand washing, but it shows you all of the important steps to get there. So maybe, oh, there we go.
Hand washing should take you about 1 minute. Use a timer or count from 1 to 10 in each of the following steps. Wet hands with water and apply enough soap to cover all surfaces of the hands. Let the water run smoothly to avoid touching the tap later on. Rub hands palm to palm to obtain a good quantity of foam. Then rub right palm over the back of left hand with interlaced fingers, and vice versa. Rub again palm to palm with fingers interlaced. Rub the back of your fingers to opposing palms with fingers interlocked, repeating this action for each hand. Rub rotationally left thumb clasped in right palm, and vice versa. To clean the tips of the fingers, rub rotationally backwards and forwards with clasped fingers of right hand in left palm, and vice versa. Rinse hands thoroughly with running water. Dry hands thoroughly with a single-use towel. If the tap is not elbow operated, use this towel to turn off the tap without touching it directly. Your hands are now clean and safe.
All right. Oh. All right. So the goal is to spend at least 20 seconds scrubbing your hand. They spent a lot longer than that on your video, but that's about the length of the time it takes to say happy birthday twice. It also is about the length of time it takes to sing the chorus to No Scrubs twice, or Ms. Jackson twice. So get all parts of your hands, and make sure when you're at home, if you use reusable hand towels, which you probably do, wash those frequently, preferably in hot water. All right, so when do you wash your hands? You should wash your hands before, during, and after you prepare food, after you handle raw meat, poultry, seafood, uncooked eggs, before you eat, after you use the bathroom, after changing diapers or cleaning up a child who's used the toilet, after you touching an animal feed or animal waste, after touching garbage, before and after caring for someone who is sick, before and after treating a cut or wound, and after blowing your nose, coughing, or sneezing. A quick note about gloves. Not something you typically wear at home, but it's something I'm seeing more and more of out and about. Gloves become contaminated the same way your hands do. So all those times on the previous slide when you have to wash your hands, those things are contaminating your gloves as well. So personally, I think for personal protection at home, pandemic or not, good hand hygiene beats glove use every single time. It means washing your hands properly. If you do wear gloves, they belong in the trash when you are done with them, which I know you know, but I'm going to say it anyway. All right, hands are not the only thing we have to keep clean. Most of us are cooking more at home these days, and some of us maybe even more than we ever have. If you're cooking for someone who's at higher risk for foodborne illness, such as someone who's immunocompromised, elderly, very young, somebody who's already sick, proper food handling is even more critical. Safe foods start with cleanliness. So you do want to wash your hands, as we talked about before. Use plenty of soap. Utensils, wash those. Wash any surface that will touch food. Make sure you're using soap and hot water to do your dishes. Produce, you absolutely should wash your produce, but you should wash it with cold water only. If you use soap on your produce, you can give yourself a nasty case of diarrhea. So maybe don't do that. That's going to use more of your toilet paper. So produce should be washed with cold water only. Anything that's got a harder skin, like say a cantaloupe or even an apple, you are also welcome to use a clean scrub brush on those if you need to feel like you're getting a better clean. Things you should not wash. This might be the most controversial thing I say today. Don't wash your chicken or your meat, please. The only thing that can reduce the number of microorganisms that tend to occur in chicken and any other meat is cooking. When you rinse it, you're splashing those bacteria around your entire work surface, your kitchen, the front of your shirt. So don't wash a chicken. Cook it properly. Don't wash commercially processed eggs, and don't wash pre-washed bag produce. If you buy a bag of salad or something at the store and it says pre-washed, don't wash it again. All right, sanitizing and disinfecting. These are two different things. Sanitizing is reducing the number of microorganisms on a clean surface to safe levels. Disinfecting is actually killing those microorganisms to a specified rate. You can use, if you have somebody who's ill at home, or if you are gonna ignore me and wash your raw chicken, you need to clean your entire kitchen afterwards, you can use bleach for this. It's important to read the directions on the packaging of the bleach and use the correct measurements for what you're trying to get done, because what you're trying to do is going to be there's different concentrations for different purposes. So just read the back of the bottle of Clorox and check. It's also important to note that only plain bleach can be used for sanitizing and disinfecting purposes. Anything that's got fragrance added or those low splash bleaches, those cannot be used for sanitizing and disinfecting. Another important thing about sanitizing and disinfecting is the contact time. That's the amount of time the chemical stays in contact with the surface you're trying to disinfect, because that's how it does its job, right? You spray it on there and you give it time to work. So what that means is that's the amount of time the surface needs to stay wet. When we're talking about bleach solutions, depending on the organism you're trying to kill, you're looking usually at about 4 minutes for a contact time. And that's how long the surface needs to stay wet in order to do it. But again, read the back of the bottle and it'll give you the information you need to know. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about is separating your foods. Cross-contamination is when pathogens from one food get onto another food. These pathogens can be transferred by your hands or utensils or when foods touch or drip on each other. Now, this picture here is an extreme example. And I think most of us know that this isn't how you prepare food safely in your home. But the result can be almost the same from any number of bad habits people have in the kitchen. So for example, say you cut up this chicken, you're trimming this chicken, and then you give the cutting board a quick rinse before you leave the kitchen. Leave it in the sink, maybe. You come back later when your chicken's almost done in the oven and you're going to prepare your salad, and you just grab the cutting board out of the sink without washing it. Have the same effect as what they're doing right here. Another example would be, say you place raw hamburgers onto the grill and then you decide to get the buns out of the bag and get those ready, and you don't wash your hands first. So you basically just put raw meat juice onto those burger buns. So it's really important to pay attention to your raw foods and the foods that aren't going to be cooked thoroughly, and keep them separate. And this actually starts at the grocery store. Use those bags they have in the meat department to bag your chicken. Use the sanitizer wipes that they have in the meat department to clean your hands after you bag that chicken. Don't put your produce right on top of it, your meat in your grocery cart. When you get home, it's a good idea to keep meats in their original packaging or store them in closed bags or containers. If you think they might drip, place them on a plate or a pan. If you're conscious about keeping raw foods from touching foods that won't be cooked, you can totally avoid cross-contamination. No big deal. Cooking. I've got a quick poll for you guys. See if I can launch it here. All right, what is the best way to make sure your chicken is fully cooked? Y'all can answer that poll for me. Give it just another 5 seconds, I think. All right. So, as you can see, using a thermometer, y'all know that is the correct answer, actually. A thermometer that is properly used is the only way to make sure that your product is done. One thing that I like to share with people is that your eyes can deceive you. So for years, the USDA, when they had inspectors in meat plants and poultry plants, they relied on organoleptic inspections, which basically means they visually check the meat. Did it look good? They would smell it. They'd touch it. They'd make sure that that's how they decided, okay, yeah, this meat is safe. Move it on down the line. It's good to sell to consumers. Meat processors didn't start having to do microbiological testing until 1994. After the Jack in the Box incident in 1993, that's when people started realizing, oh, wait, maybe there's another place in this food chain where we need to make sure that our food is safe. And so that's when they started actually testing for things like E. coli. So anyway, the same thing is true at home. You need to use a thermometer to make sure your chicken is fully cooked. All right, I'm going to give you a second question here. Those of you who answered yes to the last question, did you actually use a thermometer to check doneness the last time you cooked meat? All right. So we're about 50-50 here. Some people did, and about half of you did not. I have a feeling the results are this way is because we have so many people who do use thermometers as part of their everyday work life in this room. But that being the case, this is pretty typical. Sometimes it's even worse as far as the relation of people who know they should use a thermometer and don't actually use a thermometer. I was at a food safety conference last summer, and a person asked this question: did you actually use a thermometer to check the doneness last time you cooked meat? And like 4 of us raised our hands in this room of about 50 people. So even among people who know, they don't always do it. Okay. So the only way you know for sure that your food is safe is to check it with a thermometer. The juices can lie, although I just got I got a text from somebody saying, oh, that was me, it was a joke. Anyway, hey Tracy, glad you're watching. But looking at the color can lie to you. Looking to see if the juices run clear can lie to you. Your thermometer is not going to lie to you. So you start with a clean thermometer and you check the thickest part of the product, which is usually the center. You don't want to touch, if it's got a bone-in piece of meat, you don't want to touch bone because that can throw off your thermometer's reading. In a large something like, say, your Easter ham or your Thanksgiving turkey, or you've roasted a whole chicken, because why not? Check the temperature in more than one spot. Make sure you didn't hit a hot spot the first time around. Wash your thermometer immediately after you use it the first time. If you use a thermometer in a product and it's not completely done, and you don't wash it before you check it again, you could be cross-contaminating that product, right? Because you've got juice that potentially has pathogens in it, and you're reinserting it into product that is at that point then cooked. So always wash your thermometer after you use it. All right, next we're going to talk about chilling foods. So your refrigerator should be set to 40 degrees or lower. your freezer should be set to 0 degrees or lower. Nothing should sit out of refrigeration for longer than 2 hours. And that goes down the warmer it is in the room. You know, if you've got groceries in your car in June, you're going to want to make sure that you are putting them in the refrigerator as quickly as possible and no longer than like 30 minutes. When you're storing food in your refrigerator, store your less perishable foods in the door because that's going to be the warmest part of your refrigerator. The temperature is going to vary more in that space. There's a cold food chart from foodsafety.gov that I've put up on the screen here, part of it. It's like pages long. And Lene is going to put that link in the resources section. But it gives you a general idea of how long to keep foods. I find the freezer section particularly helpful because it tells you like what doesn't freeze well. The amounts of times they have over there for the freezer are not for safety. They are for quality. Frozen food, as long as it went into the freezer microbiologically safe, it will stay that way indefinitely as long as it stays frozen and is held at 0 or below. The refrigerator section on this chart can be helpful, I guess. It's really conservative in my opinion. But it's guidance if you want some. You do not want to thaw frozen food on the counter. So if you're taking food out of the freezer, despite what your grandmother did or what my grandmother does, you don't take the chicken out of the freezer after breakfast and let it sit out until dinner. That is an excellent way to get sick, despite, again, what my grandmother says. Nobody's dead yet. I haven't killed anyone. Where's Grandpa? Or your second husband? Neither one of them are here. Anyway. Leftovers. You want to make sure that your leftovers go into the refrigerator very promptly after you are finished eating. Nothing should sit out for longer than 2 hours. Again, but at the same time, you don't want to refrigerate hot foods. So if you refrigerate hot foods, they might not cool quickly enough. And you can also warm up everything else in your fridge. So you want to get foods cooled down a little bit before you put them in the refrigerator. To do that, you want to make the food smaller. Use shallow containers to increase the surface area that you have available for cooling. I've used an ice bath at home where I put some ice in my sink and some cold water, and you put the container down in there and let the food get cooled down that way. You have something that you're making ahead that you're going to refrigerate and you know it's going to take a long time to cool. Maybe you're making a pot of chili or something like that. Another thing you can do is take a water bottle and freeze some water in it and take the label off, obviously. Then wash the outside before you use it and use that icy bottle to stir the chili. You use that in combination with putting it in an ice bath in the sink, you'll actually cool your food quite quickly. You want to freeze leftovers that you won't use within 3 to 4 days. And make sure that when you're reheating your leftovers, you do it thoroughly. Especially when you're reheating food in the microwave, you want to make sure that it heats completely. It should reach 165 degrees, no matter what it is. And there you go. And then finally, if you want to learn more about this stuff, if this is interesting to you, we have some suggestions. ServeSafe.com is offering online food handler classes for free for the month of April. So if that is If you're interested in learning more, that's an easy way to do it. Those of you who have already had food handler, you can go in and improve your skills. If you're a fairly new hire to dining and you want to go ahead and do this, cool, send me the certificate and you won't have to take it with me for a little while anyway. Anyway, anybody can go on and learn more that way. Foodsafety.gov gives you answers to all your questions. The tables and charts that were in this presentation are all from foodsafety.gov. Some other trusted sources of information, UGA Extension Food Safety has a lot of good consumer food safety information on there. There's a lot of good stuff there. The Georgia Department of Public Health and the Georgia Department of Ag have some information on both of those. The CDC, if you're interested in particular foodborne illnesses or diseases, they have pages on each of the different foodborne illnesses you might encounter. And then the USDA and FDA. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, you ready for some questions?
I am.
All right, so I'm gonna go back. We had one on YouTube that I did want to go back and just catch real quick. How do you know when pathogens are on your food?
You don't. Yeah, that you don't. So pathogens don't usually cause spoilage. So that's one of the main ways we know that food is bad, right? Is that when it spoils. We have visible signs like mold or yeast growth or something like that. And with something like E. coli, which I mentioned before, you don't know that it's there or not. So it's important to handle food carefully. When you're dealing with raw meats, assume it's there. I mean, your chicken has got salmonella on it and it's got Campylobacter on it. Just assume it.
Okay.
There you go.
For people who, when you were talking about the bleach to clean your workspace, for people who have inhalation allergies to bleach, what would be a good substitute?
Sure. So there's, if you go to the grocery store, there's some different, you can look for food safe sanitizers or things like that, food or any kind of disinfectant that's meant for use in the kitchen. Purell makes one that is an alcohol-based surface sanitizer. And there's ones that are, like Lysol is not a chlorine-based one. Lysol's peroxide, or something. I don't remember what Lysol is, but it's not chlorine. So there's any number of alternatives, but again, read the instructions and make sure you're using them correctly.
Okay. Would there be a difference between hunted meat and store-bought meat?
Ooh, interesting. As far as the danger?
It was that question came in around the time you were talking about the heating or what the temperature should be. So I'm guessing.
If we're talking about deer, actually I think all game, I think moose, elk are the same as far as, but yeah, deer for sure, should be treated the same as beef. So 145 degrees for, steaks, any whole muscle cut, roast, things like that. If you grind it up, you should cook it to 155 degrees. Actually, I think it says 160 on the slide. That's fine too. 155 or 160 is fine. When you're talking about game birds, I would treat them exactly like chicken.
Okay. When you are thawing something in and it's in a wrapper, do you leave it in the wrapper?
It doesn't matter. You do want to make sure that if it's in your, because the best way to thaw, and I don't think I mentioned this, I should have, is to put stuff in your refrigerator and let it thaw in the refrigerator. You'd be surprised, a lot of stuff will thaw out in a very reasonable amount of time from the freezer. But I would make sure it's in some sort of container so that it won't drip.
Okay. What are your thoughts on people wearing gloves to the grocery store during the pandemic?
I don't do it. I I don't think I've seen anybody do it in a way that makes any sense to me. To me, it makes a lot more sense to make sure you go into the grocery store, use your hand sanitizer when you walk in, do your grocery shopping, don't touch anything you don't need to touch. It's not the time for massive browsing sessions, right? Get what you need and get out. And then use hand sanitizer right as you're leaving the store. Wash your hands as soon as you get home. To me, that's way more protective of the thing with COVID-19, when this virus that causes it, what you're concerned about is other people's respiratory droplets in the air and in people sneezing or coughing on you or in your very immediate vicinity. Food is not a known vector for this illness. Surfaces are not known to be a very good transmitter of this virus. So to me, washing your hands is absolutely appropriate to the risk.
Okay. What's the best way to wash berries, strawberries, blueberries, etc.? What's the best way?
I don't know the best way, but under cold running water. Yeah, under cold running water. And, if you got a particularly dirty bunch, fresh from the fields, just get your fingers and rub them a little bit.
Okay. Refrigerator thermometers. Do you recommend refrigerator thermometers?
They're a great idea. I have one in my refrigerator at home. Especially if you have an older refrigerator and it's not super reliable, it can be really, it can bring a lot of peace of mind to be able to go to your refrigerator and check and make sure that it's at the temperature you think it is. And they're cheap. They're not expensive. You can pick one up at, I know the Kroger's and Publix's and Walmart's of the world have them. I haven't looked for them at like Dollar Tree or Dollar General or Family Dollar, but they may even have them there. They are worth the peace of mind for me personally.
Okay. What's the best way? I mean, I know you told us about thawing our foods in the refrigerator, but if you need to thaw your meat, thaw out meat quickly, what's the best way to do that?
Go back and travel in time, invent a time machine, travel back in time to when you can pull it to the refrigerator in a timely manner. That's the best way.
Aside from that.
You can thaw food in the microwave as long as you're going to cook it right after you use it. That's absolutely fine. That's just as good as thawing it in the refrigerator. Like I said, as long as you're going to cook it right away after you thaw it. Because the microwave will start the cooking process. You can thaw under running water. The water does need to be 70 degrees or lower. So this doesn't work year round in Georgia because your tap water is above 70 degrees for several months in the summer. You don't want to use warm running water because that will heat the surface of the product too quickly and put it into a temperature range where bacteria prefer and like to grow while the inside is still frozen solid. So it's important to use running cool water. You put your meat in a pan and then start the water running over it. Those are really the only ways to thaw food safely.
Okay. So someone asked, why is it okay to use bleach to sanitize at home, but not at work? You knew it was coming. You knew somebody was going to ask.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have anything against chlorine. We use a quat sanitizer at work because we can get dispensers that premix the correct concentration for us. And that is the most important thing to me, is that we're not mixing chemicals in our kitchens at work. When you mix chemicals incorrectly, especially bleach, you can create a very toxic effect and can make somebody sick. So that's why we don't use bleach for sanitizing at work, and we use a quaternary ammonium compound instead.
Makes sense. When washing your hands, is it best to use hot, cold, somewhere in between?
So I'll say for my dining folks at work, the water needs to be warm, at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but not too hot. At home, use any temperature you want. That warm water thing is not based in science. It's a regulation that is based on nothing that has any experimental data attached to it. So when you're washing hands at home, wash them in whatever temperature you want.
Well, there you go. What about, okay, so this is putting frozen chicken in boiling water to cook/thaw at the same time. Okay?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay.
You can just, cook food directly from frozen. That would be another option, is that if you just, you've got frozen food and you just start cooking it. You put your frozen chicken into into the boiling water or into a pan to go into the oven. That's fine. Fine.
All right. Much appreciation for the presentation this morning. Lots of things learned, and some good, extremely useful information, and hopefully this will help everybody to stay safe at home, in your home. So is there any other questions? I think I've covered all of them. So thank you, Kris. We really do appreciate you taking time out of your morning to help us remember what to and not to do as far as keeping ourselves safe in our kitchen. Because yes, like a lot of people, I'm cooking more than I have in a whole long time. And yeah.
Me too. And people might have more might be preparing food for more immunocompromised people than they would normally as well. Maybe you have somebody elderly in your home that you don't regularly prepare food for, but is home with you right now. So I think it's important to remember that those people are extra vulnerable.
Definitely. All right. Well, on that note, we will let you guys have back a few minutes of your morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Kris, for presenting. And I hope everybody has a wonderful and safe rest of your day. This afternoon's the fireside chat, with or without the fire, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But this afternoon's fireside chat, you will get an email about that shortly. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.